Let me first, on behalf of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, welcome our speaker for today and our guest, Eric Gregory, to the webinar. Thank you so much, Eric, for taking time to do this. I also appreciate all the participants who are joining and have joined and will be joining. Thank you for taking time. I'm sure it's going to be completely worth it. I'm your host, Reena Bhatia. I'm the CEO of ProposalHelper and BidExecs. And I, many years ago, learned my skills from Eric. So I'm excited to continue this learning myself today. A quick plug-in for the Asian American Chamber. If you're not already a member, please join the chamber. It's very inexpensive, affordable. They make me do this, so I am going to do this. And if you'd like to sponsor any of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce webinars, please reach out to the chamber so that you can present your company capabilities before our speakers come on. A quick disclaimer before I introduce Eric. This webinar is for informational purposes only. None of the content is or shall be deemed to constitute any legal opinions or legal advice. So with that, let me now bring on our guest speaker, Eric. I'm going to do a very brief introduction. For those of you who have been in the industry and around the Beltway or anywhere connected to GovCon, you already know him. So I'm gonna let him tell us more about himself. However, Eric, as far as I know, you're still Senior Vice President with Shipley. Is that correct, Eric?
Well, actually, I'm an executive consultant and advisor now, simply because a couple of years ago I decided to go part-time, so I gave up that role. I mean, let's be realistic. I've been doing this now for 43 years, so I'm kind of coming to a concluding phase of my career, but still, provide, help to organizations and companies to enhance their business development practices to become more successful at acquiring business. So that's a little bit about me in terms of how long I've been doing it. I think I did it relatively successfully because I still get people to ask me to come help them. So.
and prior to Shipley, you were with CACI, which is where I crossed paths with you and really looked up to you, learned a lot. The team, I mean, we had a great team there. So let me do this, Eric, if you can talk a little bit about yourself and then share your screen and start our presentation.
So just a couple more things about me, since Reena brought up, my tenure at CACI. During that time that I was there, where I ran proposal operations for 14 years, we grew as a company from 325 million to 3.8 billion, a lot of which was organic growth. And so that's where I really kind of honed my skills, although I've done capture and proposals for a wide variety of technologies and domains and customers. And so that has provided me and afforded me the opportunity to do a lot of different things in this business as far as practical businesses are concerned. I'm skilled at DoD, federal civilian, across all DoD domains pretty much, and also across most federal civilian domains. And so it's just been a very enlightening and fun career for me. And hopefully that, those things that I've learned, I'll be able to provide, some good advice to you all today. So I'm ready to roll when you are, Reena.
Let's go ahead. Let's get started. All yours.
All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and just kind of look at a couple things here. This is kind of, one of the things I like to get people kind of excited about this stuff because it is fun. And I think one of the things in order to be successful that we need to do when it comes to business development and capture is have some fun along the way of doing this. And I want you to keep that in mind, because if you can make it fun for yourselves and make it fun for the people in your companies, it is going to be a lot more enjoyable in terms of spending the time that's required to be successful. And it does sometimes require, some long hours and some stress. And if we can make it more fun, It's just the long hours become much more worth it. So a couple of objectives here I want you to keep in mind is this issue of gaining competitive perspective. We've got to focus our energy. Too often I see in organizations, energy becomes diffuse, it's not focused, and so people don't perform as well as they should, nor achieve the objectives that they should. We've got to focus those actions on achieving competitive results. It's easy to get distracted doing this stuff, and it's also very easy to make excuses doing this stuff, and we don't want to do that. And we want to make sure that we're focused on gaining knowledge and winning through knowledge. We can never pursue new business through ignorance, and we really have to, focus on gaining knowledge to be effective. There are some things in terms of lexicon I want people to focus on. Remember, you will be getting slides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you've got to absorb some of the lexicon that's associated with new business opportunities and the pursuit of those business opportunities. It's not complex, but it really helps if you can, speak in the language of business development to make it easier on yourself as you're pursuing new business. A couple of things I want to mention is there's a clear difference between winners and losers in this business. Winners plan, they control, they adapt, and they evolve. And it's really important to think about that because this is a progression from where we start out to where we want to go. And people who continue to lose business, they spend most of their time reacting. They spend most of their time guessing as opposed to working from knowledge. And they spend a lot of time offering up excuses in terms of why they can't be successful, in terms of tackling those things that they need to do in order to be successful. Now, one thing I want to mention today before we get too far into this is that we got to remember that very often, we happen to be our own worst enemy. And I doubt many of us remember, I doubt many of us on the call are as old as I am, so maybe many of us don't remember a very famed comic strip from many years ago called Pogo. But one of the best comic strips that you can see from 1971 was when Pogo, said, "We have met the enemy and he is us," because we have a tendency to become our own worst enemy when it comes to doing business development and capture. Some things here, culture is critical. You've got to create a culture of winning in your companies. And these are just some things that you can do in order to be able to do that, to have a culture that really is focused on winning. This is from a presentation that I developed and gave to the Association of Proposal Management Professionals many, many years ago in terms of how to do that. And I'm a firm believer in it. And these are the things or the attributes that kind of, define that winning culture that we need to have. And you can probably find this presentation through the APMP website. If you don't belong, it's another organization that you probably should think about joining because you really can learn a lot and not spend a lot of money. So now let's talk about a couple things in terms of really important questions. Three things that really irritate our counterparts on the federal government. First off, when it comes to proposals, one thing that really irritates them, the number one thing is unsubstantiated claims in proposals. They don't like proposals that are full of hyperbole. So remember that when you're pursuing new business. The second thing they really dislike is when companies do not respond to sources sought. They're asking for help, and when companies don't respond to sources sought notifications, it irritates them because that's their first exposure very often to people who can, in fact, actually perform for them in terms of solving issues. The other thing that really irritates them is when companies don't respond and provide recommendations against draft RFPs. So keep that in mind as we move through this process. Now, one of the things that we need to do as businesses, both large and small, is we got to make sure we're targeting the best opportunities. And everything I'm going to talk about today, large businesses do really well, and smaller entities need to learn to do it well, and it's all scalable. So don't think because it looks complex that you can't scale to it. You have to do these things, and you have to do these things whether you have 2 years to pursue an opportunity, or whether you have 90 days, or whether you have 2 weeks. But it's all scalable, and we have to think in those terms. But number one, we got to make sure we're targeting the best opportunities that we have a reasonable probability of win for our organization's capabilities and credibility. Success depends on a few simple things: customer knowledge, market knowledge, competitor knowledge, and the hardest one, self-knowledge. We have to know the customer really well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I know I got some pre-questions about, well, how do we do that? Well, you got to figure it out. And in the age of COVID, a lot of times when we can't meet the face-to-face, you have to use tools like Zoom, RingCentral, WebEx, whatever you can, to try and get some time with people. In addition, it has increased the value of spending time doing research. If you can't get to see people, you got to do research on them. And we have various mechanisms we can use to do that. But what I've generally found is that people don't want to put the time in that's necessary to do the research, or they think they don't have time. We've got to make time to do the research, because if we can do these simple things, we will ultimately be more successful. The other thing is that we always have to be selling value in terms of what we can do for customers. And value we overcomplicate what value means. In a customer context, these are the categories that value falls into for customers: improved mission effectiveness or performance, efficiency, reduced cost, improved quality, or reduced risk. And everything we talk about with a customer in terms of what we can do for them needs to be handled in these buckets in order to really kind of develop a story for them in terms of the value that we can bring, to helping them solve their problems. Now, Shipley, and I always talk about Shipley because it's something that I understand and have used very effectively since like the mid-1980s. So I have a long history with the Shipley business development process and life cycle. And this is how it breaks down. And if you don't have a systematic way of doing these things, you need to have a systematic way of doing it. Now, our method is one system. There are multiple methods, that you can look at, but you have to have a methodology. You have to have a process. You have to have a practice, and it has to be instantiated and followed in your business, regardless of whether you're a 2-person business, a 200-person business, a 2,000-person business, or a 50 or 100,000 person business. All successful businesses operate the same way when it comes to business development in terms of having a process and a methodology to follow that they follow rigorously. And that's the difference between large businesses who do this regularly in a disciplined, organized and fashion, and smaller entities who find it a little bit more difficult to do that, but nonetheless are going to have to figure it out. So when we walk through this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but what I tried to give you in terms of looking at these various phases in the Shipley process are some inflection points that you need to pay attention to. And if you look at this slide in detail, you'll notice on the bottom, it's got some timelines down there, sample time frames, and here it says cyclical and iterative, for the first 2 phases, which is market segmentation and long-term positioning. What are documents and results that need to come out of that? And you can also see on the left axis there, you can see the people who need to be involved. And this can serve as a very good guideline in terms of when you need to be doing certain things, because you've also got milestones up there. So you need to pay attention to some of these things and be able to put them in the context of your own pursuit of business. Here's the entire life cycle that we go through, and you can see, in market segmentation, there's some very clear steps. What you have here is a checklist, okay? And in many of these things, you have to use a checklist to figure out what you're doing. This is probably the best checklist in business in the industry for business development and lifecycle management, and people don't use it as a checklist. But you have to learn to use it as a checklist so that you know where you are in time and those things that you need to be doing. And do you need to accomplish all these things in a serial fashion? The answer is no. You need to accomplish them very often in a parallel fashion, but you need to accomplish them in some degree, and sometimes you have to do them quickly. And you need to understand very often, what the 20 most effective things are you need to do in the long cycle in order to be effective. And sometimes that is a company specific kind of thing in terms of what the 20 most effective steps need to be. But they're going to become very obvious to you as we walk through this for the most part. And so long-term positioning, again, you get to see that. And here are some very specific things in terms of long-term positioning. But I think the things that are really important are making interest decisions and assigning leads for opportunities. Each one of these phases has a decision point, and I mean that the way I said it, a decision point, a go, no go, stop. And if you follow an organized and structured business development process, you're going to make decisions in terms of what you will pursue and what you won't pursue. And they need to be clean, neat decisions based on two things: your capability and your credibility. And you got to start early on these opportunities in order to enhance your position in the competitive environment. Opportunity assessment. These are things where we really, we need to look at who we are and what we can do. And we begin to cultivate those initial positions with customers. Some of the questions that came in, were oriented around, do large businesses really get to see customers? Because of smaller businesses, maybe we don't get to see them. And the answer is yes, they do. And it's critical to their success, because what customers are looking for generally, and why people get to see them, is they are looking for folks who can be viable prime contractors to solve critical mission problems that they have that they've been unable to solve to date. And smaller businesses kind of need to begin, to think in those terms. What can I do to be a viable prime? What can I do to enhance my value to customers? How can I contact them in unusual ways in order to be able to gain information? And again, very often we're going to have to rely on the tools that we have available to us in the COVID environment called Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Ring Central, whatever it is that we have, to try and establish contact with people who can help us in this particular environment. One thing to remember: customer requirements do not equal company capabilities. One of the mistakes a lot of companies make is they want to go in and they want to sell capability, as opposed to going in and talking to customers and trying to understand their problems. We never want to go in and present. We want to go in and listen, because we want to make sure that we're going in and trying to understand what a customer needs and sell to those needs, not sell necessarily to our capabilities. We always want to be focused on selling what customers need, not what we have. And this is just some more detail in terms of, being able to define what some of these steps are so that you can, in fact, make cogent decisions about what you will pursue and how you will do it. Capture an opportunity of planning, again, inflection points, making sure that we have people who can actually go and capture this business, supporting the customer's needs analysis. That's where we have to have conversation. There are multiple ways to do that. You may actually have to do that in some cases in a blind situation. You may actually have to do it because you are attending a customer, delivered webinar about future business, and you're going to ask some questions. You got to get innovative about this, because we have to get into a situation where we are collaborating with our customers in terms of providing solutions to their problems. So we got to get inventive. We got to get creative. We've got to find different channels in order to be able to reach folks, because I know it's very difficult to get customers to pay attention to us, but we've got to try it, because it's those conversations that often make a difference between winning and losing. Again, these are just detailed things that you are going to have in the package that will enable you to actually use things like this as a checklist that will help you have a disciplined, structured process. Now, one of the things I want to tell you about this, since we're throwing up the one that says proposal planning, is very interesting about this business development process, and you need to understand the timeline associated with it, is that 2/3 of the activities that really help us win new business occur before an RFP comes out. Before an RFP comes out. 2/3 of these activities. There's 96 of them. 2/3 of them, 66 roughly, occur before a solicitation comes out. That ought to tell you something right there in terms of when you need to start looking at opportunities. And if you don't subscribe, to some service like Deltec, GovWin, or some other service, Davini, or one of the other ones that's out there that helps you identify opportunities, you're always going to be behind the power curve, because you've got to establish a pipeline early on in this process. And establishing a pipeline, again, means looking at capability and credibility and deals that you can pursue and potentially win. And establishing that pipeline is absolutely critical. And it's one of the things you've got to spend some time on. And it's one of the things that when I go in and help businesses, one of the first things I want to look at is their pipeline, because I want to begin to get things out of their pipeline, that they can't possibly win. And you've got to pay a lot of attention to that. Most businesses, I go in and look at their pipeline for them, and I discard 2/3 of what they have on the pipeline almost immediately. And that's usually within an hour. And so you've got to be rigorous in determining what goes on your pipeline, what you're going to spend money on, and what you're going to pursue. Again, 2/3 of the activities in the business development lifecycle occur before the RFP, 1/3 after. And guess what? 2/3 of those activities will have a direct relationship into ultimately what you submit as far as a proposal goes. So just keep that in mind. Now, proposal planning needs to start early. And it starts, very early in the process, because we want to make sure that we're looking at things like supporting the customer's definition of needs and requirements throughout the process, and defining cost drivers that we're going to have to pay attention to, because in our methodology and in the business development methodology in general, remember this, very important. Price to win drives solution, not the other way around. Price to win always drives solution that we offer. And so these, again, are just steps that you'll be able to follow and use as a checklist, in terms of your putting in some kind of a process. Hopefully you already have one. You may just need to be more disciplined about how you execute it. But this execution is critical. This checklist is critical. Trying to make sure that you execute against it is critical. And remember, it's not over till it's over. You can win in the capture and proposal phase, and you can lose in the post-submittal phase. One of the things we want to remember in the post-submittal phase is that when you get ENs, evaluation notices, please make sure that you answer the question asked and don't volunteer any more information than what you were asked for when you get an EN. So just a couple of things there contextually in terms of looking at this, and a reminder that this is how larger businesses are successful, because they follow a well-defined methodology and process like this rigorously. They keep track of where they are in time, and they look hard at the results they're producing over time. And they really do get to go and meet with these customers. Again, you're going to have to figure out innovative ways to be able to do that. And if you can't meet directly with customers, you have to do the research. You have to look at agency documents. You have to look at customer bios. You have to look at articles that get published in things like Signal Magazine, Federal Computer Week, Washington Technology. All of that has to go in to the research that you do in terms of looking at these customers, what they're interested in, what their problems are, what solutions they want, and when they're going to have these procurements executed. Again, a lot of customers are doing things online. The advanced planning briefings for industry. You know, if agencies are offering those online, you need to make sure you're signed up to attend to them. So make sure in the post-submittal phase that you're really paying attention, you know, to not doing major cost revisions, not doing major revisions to your proposal, and ensuring that you do answer the questions asked. Because when I go to review these things for companies, generally what I find is you're not answering the same question I read. And also you're volunteering way too much information. And if you volunteer more information than what's asked, you can actually weaken your position in the competition. Decision gates. Again, I want to go through this, and I provided you more information than I can cover because it's one of those things I want you to be able to use checklists. But you have to make these kinds of interest decisions, these kinds of decisions at each of these steps in order to be effective. They have to be clear decisions. Interest, pursuit, preliminary bid, bid validation, proposal submittal, and final offer. Now, there are many ways to do this, and you've got to look at very specific questions when you go through this process in terms of, opportunities. Is it real? Can you win? Because if you can't win, you don't want to waste time and money on it. Do you want to? Is it profitable for your business? And other questions you need to pay attention to here in order to be able to make effective decisions regarding, opportunities that you should chase. And here are some that relate directly to customers. Who have you talked to? Because if you haven't talked to customers, maybe you shouldn't bid. When and where? What did we learn? Have you read the key customer documents? Don't go in and talk to a customer without having done the research on them. What's their acquisition strategy? Who are their decision makers going to be? Who's that source selection board going to be? Get a customer org chart. Start looking at who's involved. Who really is going to profit on the customer side from a successful procurement. And if you look at these org charts, when you can get your hands on them, you can discern pretty closely who's liable to be on that source selection committee. It's not going to be senior executive people. It's not going to be people who are going to serve as SSAs. It's going to be people who actually do the work day to day. Start looking at those GS-12s and below in terms of the people who are responsible for the work day to day, and you're going to be able to discern pretty quickly who might be on those source selection evaluation boards. And when you start looking at that, you need to begin building, a cheat sheet on each one of those folks who might be an evaluator, because you're going to need to understand who they are, what their role is, what they're interested in, what their hot buttons are, and how they might evaluate your proposal. Remember, we've got to make sure we're asking the right questions at the right time, because all of this drives two things. Do we have the capability to deliver a solution that solves the customer's main mission issue or problem with a price they will accept? And do we have the credibility to deliver based on relevant experience and past performance on contract? Do not bid into areas where you have no relevant experience or past performance. Rather simple, but I see people do it all the time. And so here's more, definition in terms of questions that you can ask, at each one of these points. I'm not going to go through each one of these. Again, it's designed to provide you information that you can then use to make effective decisions. And you need to be asking these questions, of your team members and of the people in your company who are responsible for pursuing new business. And if they can't get these answers, if they don't come with these answers, you need to make sure they're going out and getting the answers. And you need to give them a timeline in order to be able to do that, because these are absolutely critical questions that you need to be asking. Like I said, the larger companies do this and do this well. Smaller companies need to do it and do it well, because that's the difference that separates the large and small and the successful from the not successful. So just think about this as you roll through it. And when you have this package in terms of these are the things I can do in order to make our process more effective. Right down to proposal submittal decision questions. Are we really going to submit this proposal? I've had such situations in my career, where I've told the company we shouldn't submit this proposal. We're not capable and we're not credible. And the company decided to submit it anyway. And the letter we got back from the customer was, you didn't make competitive range. Why? Because you weren't capable and you aren't credible. So think very hard, even when you actually build your proposal, to ensure that you're actually submitting one, that has a very high probability of win. Because you can see here, if we're following a disciplined process, we start out with 100% in our domain of potential, and we actually only submit about 25% of those opportunities as a proposal. One of the things we get in the habit of doing is trying to shape opportunities and markets. There's two types, market and opportunity. There are different strategies for each, but the common goals for each are to establish favored positions with our potential customers and out-deliver and out-maneuver our competition. Remember, we have to understand what's going on with our competition or we'll never be successful. Complex and well-coordinated actions are required to do this, and you have to have a strategic plan and you have to have an annual operating plan, and these activities need to be coordinated with each of those. Market shaping involves these kinds of things. Where are customers going and how are they going? Who do we want to follow? Who do we not want to follow? What do they want? Can we deliver? And what will we deliver? And these are some things that we need to pay attention to in terms of market shaping. We want to target customer visionaries and transformational leaders. We want to get close to those folks. We want to make sure that we understand where they're driving their agencies, how they're going to get there, and what kind of money they have to do it. We have to be visible in the industry. If we're not visible in the industry, if we are ghosts, we're never going to be recognized for the value that we personally can bring, to these organizations, or value that we can bring as companies to these organizations. The baseline model still applies. These are the things that we have to do. And we have to be aggressive in terms of pursuing these customers, not aggressive in terms of being obnoxious, but aggressive in terms of getting out there and demonstrating what our value is to the community. And you look at these things, in terms of cyber, cloud computing, big data. Well, where were you? Where were these companies? Because a lot of companies missed out on the opportunities to be leaders in this field, and now they're all playing catch up. And a lot of companies tell me every day, hey, we're experts at cyber. And when I begin to ask them, well, what is it that you do that you have that's unique, that really enhances, cyber capabilities for any organization, I get no answers because everybody's really behind, and you don't want to be in that position. Opportunity shaping, we're trying to help customers have a successful procurement. What are the things that we can do to help them have a successful procurement? It has to be a critical part of your overall corporate strategy in thinking of how we're going to do opportunity shaping, because it makes a difference, and that's what successful competitors do. There are many paths to do that in terms of writing white papers on requirements, solution trade-offs, talking about risk reduction. What about RFP structure? What about work content? All these things, are critical in terms of opportunity shaping. And you've got to make sure that you're friends with the acquisition and the contracting community. A lot of times, if you are, you get information that other people might be getting it, but you might be getting it first, and that can become very critical. So cultivate those relationships with the contracting folks, and make sure that you're crafting business strategies that ultimately at the end of the day are going to make your customers heroes, because that's what opportunity shaping is all about. Now, we got to make sure that we're doing it right. We want to make sure that we're writing suggestions. Don't get caught in the trap where you're writing requirements. Suggest. If you get caught in the trap of writing requirements, you can get disqualified. Don't suggest total cost profiles. Deal with cost drivers only. And then, hey, don't take any material from customers if offered, because it could be source selection sensitive, and it may get you thrown out of a procurement. We want to make sure that we're always going to be ethical, but we don't want to be afraid to be a good partner to our customers either. Now, when I talk about decision gates and things like that, a lot of companies have trouble with that because they say, well, how do I manage this process? Well, thresholding and tailoring, are really, critical. Not all opportunities are equal. We have to delegate sometimes decisions in order to be able to get control of our organizations. The number one management paradox in business is I have to give up control in order to gain control. One person can't do it all. So we have to tailor the decision-making process to the value of opportunities and to the organization. And you need to develop rational standards for governing who makes a decision and what opportunities they're going to make the decision on in terms of value. Now, for smaller organizations, I've put this notional thing together, and your organization may be different, but I put a notional approach together so you would have something, to be able to go by to figure out what's the right way to do it in your organization, because you can't do it all by yourself. The president or the CEO of a two-person company can't make all the decisions. Somebody's going to, the other person's got to do it sometimes. So think about that in order to gain efficiency and effectiveness in terms of how you manage a business development process, because here are some things that can be done in order to try and get control of it, even if you are a small organization. And the thing that has to be done is to have rational standards and making sure everybody understands in the organization how this process is going to be managed. And so some final thoughts on the upfront piece of this. The emphasis is on decision. Do not kick the can down the road, and keep it simple as much as possible, because you have to. And then the other thing, remember this: a good capture plan forms the basis for a good decision gate briefing. You do your capture plans right, you're not creating extra work. Let's talk capture, because I do want to allow time for some questions at the end. This is how you capture business. This is how the big guys do it. Opportunities get discovered early, and the customer may not know them well, but they're going to drive it ultimately to the point where the customer knows them well and the company's positioned to bid and win. Well, how do you do that? The 4 C's that enhance probability of winning are knowing the customer, knowing your competitor, understanding your own capabilities, and selling valued solutions and cost. It's pretty simple, but it's also difficult to execute. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, we got to start early. It could be 2 years to 90 days. In some cases, it's 2 weeks. I had a situation at CACI where we won a big deal, $70 million. We didn't find out about the deal till about 3 weeks before the opportunity came out, but it was right in our wheelhouse. We screwed it up. We should have known. But we figured out who the right 3 people were we needed to contact in order to get critical information about what the customers were going to want. So we made 3 phone calls. We got the information we needed. We bid a task order, and we won a $70 million deal. And the reason we did that is because all of those things you saw up in that business development process, we fundamentally did them all not in 2 years, but in 2 weeks. And so it can be done. but it has to be done in an organized and disciplined methodology, but it is scalable, and it's scalable in time. And that's one thing we learned. It's scalable in time. You're not going to have a 50-page capture plan. You're going to have a 5-page capture plan, for where it's a short timeline, but early can be relative, because a lot of times we don't find out about these opportunities now until we're within a 30 or a 40-day period, but we still have to do all the right things. Hopefully we get a little more time than that, but if we don't, the key is start early. Remember, early can be relative, and we have to do that. These are things, Gavini did a study a few years ago. These are things that decision makers value when evaluating proposals that we need to also talk about when we're working capture: experience, expertise, value, customer service, trustworthiness, innovation, and employee care. So think about these things when you're working at capture. We've got to know these customers and the decision makers. We got to identify them to the best of our ability. We're not always going to be right, but we got to define their role, in whatever organization they happen to be in, what their role is going to be in terms of influencing or the buying decision. We have to understand their hot buttons. We have to try and have meetings with them. Use Zoom, whatever you can. Go to, get on online events and demos. Do the research. Networking. You may know somebody that actually knows this person. You need to talk to that person that knows them if you can't get to them. I'm doing a job for a customer right now. We actually had a customer show up at our facility fundamentally unannounced, wanting to talk to us. Well, how did that happen? Well, because, we were in a situation where we had information that customer wanted. They actually did some research on us, and they were able to find the information and then wanted to come to us and talk about it more. So that was very important to the client, that I'm working with. When you win the customer, you have to do it by doing these things: study, listen, respect, solve, educate, commit, and then defend. Sometimes we have to help our customers in manifold ways. We have to gain their trust. And if we're not having a continuous exchange of meaningful information, our P-win is not going up. Once we win the customer like that, we got to keep them. And some of the things we need to do: we need to be humble. We need to explore with them. We need to win through facts and data. We need to promote their program. We need to give them useful information through white papers. We need to define for them, hopefully, what success means in their context, and create a path to get there and shape that procurement process. Because when they know we're vested in their success, you'll keep them. And it's called enlightened self-interest. Because we really do need to understand what's really important to them by gathering that customer intelligence. And it can be the program requirements, their wants, needs, their risk profile, whether or not they have any kind of hidden agendas, and of course what their cost concerns happen to be, because we always have to be sensitive to cost. Everybody wants more for less if they can get it, but sometimes we have to remember customers want more for more if they can get it. We just have to be able to justify it. Remember, in terms of FAR Part 15, if it's a FAR Part 15 procurement, these are the things that we can talk about with customers. Do not be afraid to talk to them about these things. Do not be afraid to submit a white paper. Maybe you have to submit it blindly. Maybe all you have is an email. But if you think you have something that you can help them, write that white paper. You got to do something to get noticed, and it's harder in this environment than it has ever been. So sometimes you got to take the chance and pitch one over the transom, a white paper, to see if you can get somebody to notice you. But make sure that you are in fact responding to sources SART, responding to RFIs, and responding to draft RFPs if you think you really want to participate in that. And don't forget to look at what you can do with other transaction authority opportunities. Many more of those are coming out. Number one, they're specifically oriented towards small business. Number two, it's easy for customers to make sole source awards through an OTA. Some of them are still competitive, and you have to understand how to operate in that environment, especially if you're a technology-based company. But even if you're a service-based company, do not ignore it, because very often even service-based solutions, can be done through prototypes. And we got to, you've got to make yourself, familiar with these various ways you can go, because often you should be suggesting to customers potentially, especially if you're a technology-based company, could you use an OTA in order to be able to do this, to get something fielded quickly? Because at the end of the day, this is what we're driving for, competitive separation. There's a whole lot of competitors out there, and we have to be viewed as unique and more valuable than any other competitor, because that path to victory is not, a straight line, and it can be a challenge in order to be able to do that. But remember, when we make the sale, at the end of the day, we have to develop a proposal that communicates value to the customer. That's what they're buying, value. Every discussion we have, everything we do has to be oriented around understanding what they value and delivering that value to them. So how do we do it? Well, get yourself a capture plan template. I put some components in here of the Shipley capture plan template because it focuses on the key things we need to know about. But you need to have a capture plan template. You need to use it. You need to review it, and your people need to, do it because it is the plan, that we need to develop and execute against for a business development project. That's why old program managers make pretty good caption managers. They're used to executing a program plan. All this is the execution plan for a business development program. First, we have to know what it is that we're bidding, the who and the what. We got to know the customer. We got to know the program. We have to understand what's important to the customer. We have to have those hot button issues and the background information associated with that. We have to know who our competitors are. We have to know what their history is. We have to know what their strengths and weaknesses are and how it relates to customer issues so that we can try and defeat them in a competitive environment. And if we have these things, it enables us then, to go ahead and execute, that capture program, that business development effort in an organized and structured way that's going to increase probability of win for us continuously over time. And in order to be able to do that, we have to have the right kind of capture leader. And the successful capture leader has these attributes. Number one, they have to embrace the process, and they have to be able to impose the discipline. They have to manage to a capture plan that's reviewed independently in a process called a blue team so that they know they're going down the right path. They have to set high expectations for the capture team. We're not going to bid. Anybody can bid. We're going to win. And here's how we're going to do it. We have to focus every minute on increasing probability of win over time. They lead by example. You have people in your organizations that lead by example. Those are the people you want capturing new business because they're going to help the team succeed, and they're going to make the right actions happen at the right time. They're going to figure out always how to work from a position of knowledge, never from a position of ignorance. And they're going to do the hardest thing that a capture manager can do. They're going to recommend a no bid when they have to, and the executive team needs to support them in that regard. So just some attributes that you can look at. I know very often with companies, they want to know, how can they get affordable help? And one of the things that came up in kind of the pre-questions was, what red flags do I look for when I'm hiring help? My comment on that usually is, use your common sense. If you think somebody can help you, they can. If you think somebody's a little weak on experience to help you, they are. If you think somebody's blowing smoke, they are. So just use your common sense in terms of evaluating whether somebody can help you with your business development processes or your proposals or not. Follow your intuition. It's almost always going to be right. And if you ever doubt that, read the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, and it will restore your faith in some of your intuitive decision making. But how can you get help? Well, number one, if you're a smaller entity, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get help. You just have to spend money wisely. And there are things where you can get help from people in terms of letting them help you assess your captures, assess your proposals. Maybe you just need a good compliance matrix or cross-reference matrix developed. Get that kind of help. It's one-off kind of stuff, but it can be very important. Maybe you just need somebody to develop a compliant outline for you or to review it. Maybe you do need more help in terms of proposal management or capture management. But get your proposal writing and editing help. You know, target various points right before pink team, right before red team. You know, just get advice. And sometimes the best advice you can get is when you conduct pink or red team reviews, which on smaller proposals require days worth of effort and may give you some very valuable advice. And a lot of these services can be done virtually, you know, or on site, you know, and Shipley's a place you can come to get this kind of help. And we have competitors, and we're not afraid to say, you know, investigate everybody and see where you can get good help, because it's invaluable, you know, in terms of trying to get that help. So we can provide, you know, services across the country. We do like to work with smaller businesses. You know, we do try to work with them effectively and design situations where you can get the help you need, you know, a lot of good help and not spend a lot of money. And so some of these things that we do, capture assessment reports, for example, when done right, we can actually help you basically write your capture plan for you for a fixed price that's very reasonable. And Kedron Dillard, my colleague, is, you know, on the line today, and you can look up her contact information, or we'll make sure that you get it. And she would be a good place to start if you ever need help in terms of looking at this. And you may also want to attend some of our virtual workshops. We're starting to do them again, you know, open enrollment kind of things, but very often we do tailored workshops for people as well. And sometimes we do them on very specific subjects. So make sure you have a good business development strategy, allocate your resources, measure progress, get that gain and keep disciplined process and leadership, you know, and hire experts as required, you know, outside to help you. And I will take any questions. We do have a few minutes for questions. I'll take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Eric. That was a lot of information in a very condensed amount of time, but useful. Thank you. There are a lot of questions that have come in, and I'll try and moderate that and give them to you. But one of the questions, three questions that we had is your experience in running a successful pipeline review meeting. What should an executive ask for and not go through the minutia of, you know, listening to, oh, I sent an email, I made a phone call. What is a good way to run a successful pipeline review meeting?
Well, I had some good list of questions there that you can go back and review. But the essentials that you're going to want to probe are, you know, basically three things. You're going to want to probe customer knowledge. Who have we talked to? When did we talk to them? And what did we learn? And how is that going to position us to bid? Because we have to, and those things revolve, you know, jointly, you know, around things like, you know, what's their acquisition timeline? What's their acquisition strategy going to be? And what is the solution that they're looking for in terms of trying to solve their mission or service problem? And so, you know, so you can ask questions like that. Then you get to the credibility issue: is what have we done in terms of, designing a solution that are going to meet their requirements and solve their hot buttons for them. And then what do we think it's going to cost to do that? And do we think our cost is going to be credible? And you just keep building on those questions throughout the process. And generally, if I can go in and ask those three or four questions, very on in an interest phase, I can start eliminating opportunities to bid on very quickly because nobody has the answers. It's not complex.
Right. Okay, another question, and I think this is based on what you mentioned, understanding and knowing customer. A common complaint that at least I hear is the customers won't even take our phone calls. What are some of the techniques the large companies are using to get to the customer? You mentioned Zoom and GoToMeeting. That's assuming that they've accepted your invite to attend your meeting. But how do they even get to these people is a common question. And I know that there is no right or wrong answer to this, but it just keeps coming up over and over again.
Well, I mean, again, why do customers meet with larger organizations? Because they believe the larger organizations are viable prime contractors to solve their problems. It's pretty easy. It's a lot easier for me to get a meeting with a customer, if I'm Lockheed Martin than it is a small business, correct? Everybody agrees with that. So, I mean, you really have to kind of, come up with some inventive things, and you have to really try and figure out ways where you can get noticed, and that very often may be attending an APBI, maybe asking a question. You may have to publish an article, in one of these magazines, that really highlights, what you can do for certain types of customers to get yourself noticed. You're going to have to use, guerrilla tactics to do it because, a head-on offensive may not be the answer, and that's why I'm saying you may have to blindside. Send in a white paper to a program manager. It only takes sometimes one to read it to get their interest if you've really done something that's really good for a different customer and demonstrates that you can help them. I mean, I've said this before, and people, kind of laugh when I say it, but you have to learn to become a professional stalker. You really need to look at, what are the opportunities out there available to me in order to be able to, to help somebody. I mean, invite somebody on LinkedIn. Do whatever you need to do. Be creative. But you're going to have to use some different techniques because, customers only want to meet with people that they believe can help them solve a problem. And until they have some belief that you can help them solve a major problem that they have, they're not going to accept the meeting. So you gotta get yourself exposed in a way that they're going to take an interest in you. So you're going to have to do seminars. You're going to have to participate in webinars. You're going to have to write articles for some of the trade magazines. You're going to have to highlight who you are, what you do, and why you can help a particular customer. And you just have to use various techniques. And if you get an interest, don't tell a customer you want to go in to see them and chew up more of their time. Ask them, can we do a 15-minute WebEx meeting? 15 minutes is better than 50 minutes, right? From the customer's perspective.
Right.
And remember, you're there to learn. Ask questions. Find out what's important to them. Don't give briefings. That just irritates them.
Well, your advice on writing a white paper really has resonated with the audience. Several questions around white papers, and they're asking, is there any good example of what should you include in a white paper?
I mean, yeah, there are, but you can just Google white papers and find out, kind of things that technology firms write as white papers all the time, whether it's Microsoft, Google, Amazon Web Services, all these organizations are putting out white papers. But fundamentally, a white paper is actually pretty easy to write, and it can involve all sorts of things. It can involve technical issues, proposal structure issues, evaluation criteria, risk reduction, processes. And really all you want to do is you want to identify, a particular issue that's important to a customer. and then you want to provide them some recommendations on how they can solve, those particular issues, and then you want to just write a little summary that reminds them of what you said, but in between recommendations and the summary, you want a section that's called value and benefits, because your recommendations, you want to make sure that they understand very clearly what it is that brings them value and how that might benefit them. And just because all those things would appear in your proposal, that would be a good thing, right?
Yeah, and for that, I want to add to it that know whom you're writing the white paper for. Don't make it, I mean, if you don't have a target audience in mind, it's not going to get anywhere. So
correct.
That is very
writing it for a specific person or a specific group of people.
Right, right. Well, there are a lot of other questions, but I think you have covered them in your slides. And when we publish this, people can go back and review the recording, slow down and look at your slides, and you're going to share the PDF as well. So Eric, I truly appreciate your time. I don't want to impose any more than I'm allowed to. So thank you again for being part of this webinar series for us. For all of those who have attended, we will be posting the recording. We'll send out the link. You'll have access to it. One last question, a plug for you, Eric. The question on, does Shipley have audio or online libraries of training? Where and how can they access Shipley training?
We have a few courses, online that can be accessed for a fee. They're baseline courses, but we are running a lot of online, open enrollment kind of things nowadays, and that's that's something you can go right to our website and take a look at that. And also, you can also, if need be, call the main line and ask to speak to Brad Douglas, who operates all of our training activities. And if you want more information, also, you can look and Rena, we will send you Kedron's information as well, and that may be a good place to start.
That'd be great. All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap this thing up. Thank you all for attending. Eric, again, thank you so much, personally from me and on behalf of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks for inviting me.
Bye-bye.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the contracting committee members for their dedication and support to make AACC Government Contracting webinar series possible.